Here.
Commissioner Cope,
Here.
Commissioner Madlin,
Here.
Commissioner Rogg,
Here.
Commissioner Tim,
Here.
alternate Commissioner Leavesley,
Here.
alternate Commissioner Warren,
Here.
and Chair Wojtash.
Here.
There are 8 members present.
Okay. So thank you. Let the record show that a quorum is present. And now we will move on to approval of the consent agenda. For this meeting, we've got the minutes from last meeting to approve, which are part of the consent agenda. And then our 2 big topic items are the Town of Keystone Housing Needs Assessment draft, and then also an update on the SE group.
Yep.
If, is there anything anybody wants, questions or items they want removed from the agenda? Okay. Hearing none, could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented? So moved. A second?
Second.
All in favor of approving the consent agenda as is, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Okay, the consent agenda is approved. Okay, now we can go right to business. And the big topic is the housing needs assessment draft.
Mhm.
Lindsay, do I go to you first or
Yeah,
right
if you don't
to?
mind.
Yes,
Just briefly, again, we're well into our comp plan, and this, SE Group was retained in part for also to help us provide a housing needs assessment, which is now statutorily required.
right.
With that being said, SE Group was lucky enough to retain EPS as part of the team. And we are going to hear what information they have gathered over the last 5 months, 4 months? I don't know, I've lost track.
Right.
So typically, this type of information is not that exciting. But with that being said,
Right.
I believe you're going to be somewhat surprised and with the information that they have found. And with that being said, EPS.
Yeah,
Let's do it.
yeah, we'll do,
Welcome.
I'm reading the room here. I think we want to do a little bit of give a little more background than we have in the material you've read so far. So we'll introduce ourselves first and then get into the material. So my name is Brian Duffany. I'm a principal, our firm, the name rolls right off the tongue, Economic and Planning Systems. So our office is in Denver. This is my colleague Avery Weiss. He's an associate with us. So our business, we call it the economics of land use. So we work around issues that involve, I'm the worst pitch man, but like economics, real estate markets, land use policy, economic development, funding, things like that. And housing is a big part of that. Our Denver office has been open since 1999, and we have the good fortune of working a lot in mountain communities. So I've been with the firm for about 20 years, and I've done a lot of work on housing, community planning, and economic development issues in mountain towns all over the state. I-70 corridor, Steamboat Route County, Southwest Colorado. And so we have a lot of experience in housing and helping local communities figure out what to do on a variety of issues. We're not advocates. We are here to help communities, provide them information and help them, analyze problems and help them figure out what to do based on to use good information and make good decisions is what we like to say, I guess. And so a housing needs assessment is as Lindsay noted, they're now required by state law to allow you to be eligible for certain types of funding. But historically, many communities, especially mountain towns, have been doing housing needs assessments for a long time because they like to take a periodic look at their housing market, at their economy, their demographics, and use that information to inform their land use policies and their housing programs. And so that's everything from, ordinances and zoning to how they're spending money, how they're allocating their budget resources on housing and other capital and operational needs. So this information is intended, this is your first one. We're kind of starting from scratch. So this information and our draft thoughts and recommendations we want to just kind of have a discussion with you because I think this is new and we're starting from a new place. So we want to just present some of this and give you some of our initial ideas, but we really want to engage with you and get your thoughts on what types of housing challenges or priorities you think the town may want to try to address. So do you have any questions about that? And then we'll just kind of get into it.
Okay, sounds good.
Sounds good. Okay, let's roll. Then you can probably advance. Yeah, that's good right there. So what we're gonna, the recommendations that we're gonna build up to, we're gonna show you some data, some information, some analysis. And then our kind of draft thoughts are kind of organized around this context. The town is pretty well built out. There's not a lot of developable land remaining. Which relates to some of the policies we'll talk about. You're also small. You don't have a massive budget and a big army of staff people. So there's kind of limits how much horsepower you can put to different types of programs. Those are probably the biggest contextual elements of it. You've got some funding coming in now with now being part of SCHA, Summit Combined Housing Authority. So there's a little bit of structure to work with there as well. Next, please. Okay, and it's great that you're doing this as part of the comprehensive plan because they're very related. And at the last engagement meeting, there was a section on housing and what we found here was that it just echoes broader themes in the comprehensive plan that people are looking for ways to make Keystone more livable, more attractive to year-round residents, to year-round residents. And specifically a broader diversity of housing types. As you'll see in the data, and you live here. The other thing I meant to say is there's probably data in here that you're like, oh yeah, duh, that makes sense. But so we may not be telling you things that you don't already know, but sometimes it's interesting to see it actually show up in data. But as you'd imagine, there's not a lot of housing diversity here. It's kind of resort condos, large single-family homes, and employee housing that is owned by Vail Resorts and some other affordable housing. So those were big themes, making it more livable and more diverse housing options. Next. Go for it, Avery.
Sure. Yeah, so giving a little bit more context onto the incomes in Keystone and kind of giving some comparison to the county as well. So with Keystone, incomes are a bit more concentrated especially in the $50,000 to $75,000 range. It's around 40% of households are in that range, likely due to just the types of jobs, types of housing that's available in Keystone. And so kind of similarly, nearly 70% of Keystone households have household incomes that are less than 80% of Summit County's area median income for a two-person household. So that was a mouthful, but kind of breaking that down. So we use AMI as we kind of benchmark to the county of like what is typical incomes in the county. Now 80% of Summit County's AMI would be, I think we have the number.
78,000 for two people.
Right, 78,000. So that means that nearly 70% of Keystone households are earning less than $78,000 per year. And that's kind of consistent with this 40% of households in that $50,000 to $75,000 range.
It really, you can just see that, the light orange is Keystone, the dark orange is Summit County, the income distribution for full-time residents. That's important to be clear. These data reflect full-time residents, people that report this as their usual residents. And so the income distribution is just skewed much lower than Summit County as a whole, which makes sense when you look at the job makeup that Avery's gonna talk about as well. Love this one.
Yeah, so this one, you probably all, this is not probably major news to you all, but, so home prices are high. Their, median sale price in Keystone in 2024 was $824 or $25,000. You can see from the chart, it's increased steadily since 2019. And yeah, so single family is 2.75 million, and yeah, condos and townhomes are the 820,000. So it's difficult to afford housing. Not news to everyone here.
Yeah, we didn't feel like we needed to drill that one in very far.
Yeah.
Because we can do a whole bunch of math that shows, okay, at 2.75 million, what do you need to afford? What income do you need to afford that? And, you know, what's the gap between your median household income and what you need to afford the median purchase price? It's big.
Quick question. The AMI is for what year?
I think we're using 2024 AMI in this.
Okay, thanks.
That's a really astute question.
And again, it's all census data. It's one consistent source, or are there other sources that you incorporate?
Back to that chart, the next income distribution. Yeah, that is a complicated question. This is, data is challenging in mountain towns because they're small. And so the income distribution on the left is American Community Survey data,
Okay,
which is census.
yes, yes.
Now, those are demographic statistics, okay? The income definitions. So if you go to Summit Combined and look up their income qualification definitions, income definitions or AMIs are not a demographic statistic. They are a programmatic number that are used to qualify people for housing, social service programs. They are established by HUD.
Yes.
And so they're kind of based on local income and wages, but they're not a demographic statistic. But what we did here was we did some math. That's what we do. We did some math, and then we can kind of align we can convert, you know, $75,000 household income into what percent of AMI that is at I think we use a 2 or 2.5, a 2-person household size. It's complicated. And now the issue that you may be getting at is AMIs. The AMI definitions have been going up really fast in a lot of places, especially in mountain towns, because the way we just did a deep dive on this like a month or two ago. The way that HUD they have to do this across the country for every county and metro area in the US. So they have a little bit of a sort of a statistical model and process that they use. But the issue is, if you don't want to hear about this, tell me.
No,
we do.
this is very relevant.
All right. So the issue with AMI is that it's been benchmarked to inflation. So one of the big drivers that they use to update the AMIs every year is a component of inflation, and what's been going on with inflation over the last 6 years. It's been going up really, really fast. And so in most places like here, all of our mountain town clients are like, man, our AMIs are way out of step with reality.
Yes.
It's because they're driven by inflation. And it looks like they're changing their methodology a bit. And I think they're going to be using a different type of index that's more tied to local wages to adjust AMIs. So hopefully because that's exactly what's going on. Like wages are not going up at the pace of AMIs. And so, if, you know, when you're setting your affordable sale prices and your affordable rents with housing programs, they're not actually affordable because the AMI definitions are just out of whack.
That's why there's vacancy here in the affordable set aside units.
That's what we've heard, that
It's
we're
definitely
having.
not leasing up as intended.
Yes, we have heard that. So it's tough. And so, yeah, you end up you might pro forma a affordable housing development at certain rents that you think you're going to get, and then they're benchmarked to these AMIs, and then people can't afford those, and you can't lease your project up.
Okay.
It is complicated stuff.
Which inflation index is used?
I don't think it's the CPI. It's something else that HUD has, that they work with the BLS.
Don't know it. We can get it later. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a really dive. Yeah, so I don't know, there's push among some communities to want to base their programs off wages. But if you're using any federal program, you've got to be you've got to be, if you're in a LIHTC project, if you're getting state or federal funding, you're usually wedded to AMI.
We would never qualify anywhere here for LIHTC, correct?
You might.
Intergreen.
Wintergreen was like
Intergreen, oh, they got, okay, so how did they carve that out?
income housing tax credit program.
Yeah.
Yep. It's pretty much the only federally funded, it's pretty much the only federal funding source for affordable housing development.
Thank you.
All right, we're getting deep.
Yeah, go ahead.
Good. Next. Yeah, we did that one. That one. Okay, this is an interesting chart. And again, this is like it'll make sense to you because you live here. So the blue, this is the percent of homes by how they're used. So the dark blue on the bottom it's called occupied housing units. Those are full-time resident households. So those are people that live here full-time. So in 2023, about 17% of the households. A household is a group of people related or unrelated living in one housing unit. So if Avery and I were roommates, we would be a household. A single person living alone is a household. A family is a household. They're in one housing unit. So
Ask you to add that kind of definitions in general. There's a whole lot of abbreviations.
Yep.
Most of them are defined in all.
Should have added a gloss.
And a definition section, exactly what you just said is very useful.
And you have that in the report. I remember reading all that about the definition of a household, and you have it.
Okay.
Yeah. A little summary.
But yeah, ask any, you just ask as many questions as you want. We're here for you. I just don't want to make sure we take up too much of your time. So if you're like, move it along, Brian and Avery, just tell us. Yeah, so 17% of the homes here are lived in year round. And then the rest of them are essentially second homes. The census, these data get really fuzzy in mountain towns because let's say I lived in Dallas most of the time and I happen to be here when the census mailed their form to me and it says, oh yeah, I live in Keystone. And then I'm going to get counted in those with the blue people there. So but by and large, you drive around, this, most of the homes here are second home. They're second homes and to be rented, they're condos to be rented short term. So, and that's just because it's kind of a purpose built resort community. That's just what it is. Next.
Can I ask, give me an example of other vacant units?
Oh, I'll go back. So the census breaks vacancy status into, so the other category there is vacant under construction, vacant for sale or for rent, then like a catch-all of other vacant, which is like miscellaneous, and then vacant for seasonal, recreational, or occasional use, which is second homes.
Right. That part I understood. I wasn't quite sure what was an other.
Realistically, in mountain communities, we just lump all the vacant together because they don't know, they don't know if that unit just happens to be vacant because there's no guest in it that week. It's an overnight rental that's vacant, or is it a long-term rental that's vacant? It's really hard for them to tease out that kind of stuff in a mountain town. So I think the important thing to focus on is the difference between residents, and there are this many resident full-time households and this many housing units that are used for something else that are not full-time people. Right.
And I just want to say to our colleagues that are joining us remotely, please, what's the best way for them to say a question? Just unmute and say, hey, I have a question. Yeah. So just unmute and have a question. I'm cognizant of you all.
Yeah. All right, next.
Go ahead, Brian.
So this goes to the diversity of the housing stock here. So again, we're kind of stuck with the census definitions here. A multifamily building is anything where there's more than one dwelling unit between the ground and the sky. So an apartment or a condominium building. So the yellow are multifamily structures. Those are mostly resort condominium buildings. And then the single family detached is the next one above it. And then a small smattering of like townhomes and duplexes and stuff like that. So mostly condominiums. And as you know, most of those are really set up for guest rentals.
So the 3,800, almost 3,900 units, I can multiply the percentage directly to get the number of units in that category, or are we comparing slightly apples and elephants?
Yeah, you're right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like 3,800 times 0.7 will be about that. I mean, there's more precise.
Thank you.
We can break those numbers out as absolutes if you want.
That's close enough.
Yep. All right, next. Go ahead, Avery.
Yeah, sure. So this chart here just gives a picture of Keystone's employment and how it's distributed by different industries. And in the light blue bar also compares to Summit County. Now, as you can see, the industry is dominated by the accommodation and food services industry, which is, again, not surprising. And now this just kind of highlights the challenge of housing in a mountain community, especially resort community like Keystone. You know, it's a desirable place to live. People want to, you know, have their second homes here. And yet, in terms of employment base, it's kind of surrounding the resort and accommodation. So it just makes, you know, the housing market's hot, but, you know, the incomes aren't quite there. As, you know, I think we have, I'm not sure if we have it in there, but just the actual incomes in the accommodation food service.
But look at how much more concentrated the tourism industry is in Keystone than it is in Summit County, right?
Right. Yeah.
That makes sense.
It just adds an extra level of challenge for the housing. Another interesting data point here is that only about 20% of the people who actually work in Keystone also live in Keystone. Right. So there's a lot of in-commuters. And that you'll see later, I think in the next slide, that kind of factors into the housing need where, you know, ideally that ratio would be a little higher. You have more people who work here also living here, creates more of a community, a town feel. So that's kind of a key kind of.
No, it's a big statistic.
Remember that one. That's an important one.
I read that, though. I was wondering how many of the people live in the county? Because it's not a horrible commute to come from Dillon, you know? So do you have that statistic?
Remember if we broke it out with that much granularity?
Mm-hmm.
We want to be a little careful. So the smaller the community is, I'll just be totally honest, like the smaller the community is, the worse the data gets. You want to be a little careful about getting too precise with, you know, trying to break it down with like Summit Cove, Dillon Valley and things like that. But you're right.
The only reason that I said that is because it makes it sound like, you know, we need more housing possibly than we need because somebody could be living in Frisco or Dillon and it's not that horrible.
We'll talk about that.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Exactly.
That's an interesting point.
There's a lot of preference on where, you know, people have chosen where to live based on a lot of factors.
Right.
Do you have anything like an average commute to work?
Commute time?
Yeah.
We didn't look
Well,
at,
that would answer it. wouldn't it?
we didn't look.
Which would help give us my
We could look at that commute time.
Because the difference between Kremling and Dillon is massive,
Right.
especially in the winter when the.
Leadville.
snow starts flying.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, Leadville's a big,
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Leadville's a huge one, but it's just over a pass.
is
Right.
that the type of thing you can do? Can you get that kind of
We
data?
can look at it. There's, you know, the data does give us some geographic breakdowns. They also have to work with privacy considerations
Yeah.
and stuff, so they can't reveal too
Right.
much.
Right.
We can look into it. I don't want to overpromise.
Right.
It gets fuzzy
Yeah.
and you can see some weird things. Like you'll see people, I would wager a buck that if we looked at the geographic splits, we would see a whole bunch of people from Denver commuting in here.
Right.
Yeah, like you start to see weird stuff the closer you look.
I mean, I think what we all will know is that it's going to be a range.
Right.
So that 20% sounds so small,
Mhm.
but some people are coming from really close.
Yeah, they might be coming
It's
from
in-
Summit Cove or
Yeah,
Dillon Valley.
yeah,
It's not that far.
yeah.
Right.
We'll just have that. We can, have that as an asterisk by that.
Yeah. We pointed out because a big focus of, when you think about land use and transportation,
Right.
land use and transportation demand are really related. And so a lot of communities want to reduce traffic. They want to reduce vehicle emissions and accidents and travel time. And so they want to bring jobs and housing closer together.
Right.
And so that's why we point that out.
A little question on the reverse of this, because it's my understanding that some of the housing that we have right now is countywide, subsidized, et cetera. And I'm curious, do we have any, even a wild ass guess on what percentage of the people who live in here go elsewhere or outside the town for their job?
Oh, I don't know. We can look at that. We might have it in the data folder, but we didn't look at that specifically.
Brian, is it
Okay.
possible also to break out that 20% and see of that 20%, how many are residing in deed restricted? Is that possible?
No.
Okay.
We did a really detailed household survey throughout the county. We could do that, but that would cost a lot of money and take a whole bunch of time.
Is it best guess or no idea?
No idea.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. I mean, there's probably data on how many, if you looked at how many deed restricted units there are in the county total, that would be a good number to know. Those numbers are sometimes harder to get than you think.
Yeah.
Speaking from experience.
County's assessor database does have records, but you have no idea what characteristic that record is,
Exactly.
which means it's really tough to extract.
Yeah. So big takeaway, if you start building deed restricted housing or doing housing programs, keep good track of what you do. All right, next.
Yeah.
This next slide, and Brian can chime in as well, but
Want me to
the,
set this one up?
sure, go
There's a
for it.
lot packed into this.
Yeah,
This is something that the state requires us to do in a housing needs assessment. There is no legal obligation tied to this. But we're required to estimate the amount of housing needed to address existing housing problems, which we call catch up. So catching up with existing housing problems. And then to meet the need for future growth.
Keep up.
Keep up. And the way we do it is, and the legislation isn't super clear on how to do it, and they've tried to establish legislation for the entire state to, tell like Colorado Springs how to do it and to tell Aspen how to do it, and they're very different places. And Keystone's a very different place. So you can look at these as policy targets, as an order of magnitude of need, but you're not required to build this amount of housing. If you're looking for Prop 123 funding, you may have did you guys file a target? Have you guys established a Prop 123 baseline and a target yet?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. That's we don't need to get into that, but so there's a lot packed into this. And when in a regional housing needs assessment, you have to do it on a regional basis, and then you have to allocate the need by jurisdiction. And you can do that in a number of ways. It's usually done by jobs, and that can create some political concerns among communities because they feel like someone's telling them how much housing to build where, which they feel like infringes on local land use. But there's nothing legally binding about this. So do you want to break it down and do the catch up?
totally. So basically what this table is doing, it's breaking down the amount of units needed by how affordable, like how steep of an affordability gap is there to cover. So, we have extremely low income that has to be affordable for those making less than 30% of AMI, which, is a pretty low number. And then it goes all the way up to the upper income earning greater than 120% AMI. And so that's kind of on the left side there. And then we also break it out by, like what we said, existing shortage and projected need. So the catch up and keep up. So you can see right off the bat, there's a lot more need in the existing shortage versus projected need. And so that's existing shortage. That's a big chunk of that is made up of in commuting. So that reason why that number is high is because Keystone is a high in commuting community. And so when, again, the methodology is still kind of being worked out, but a big part of it is, ideally in a perfect world, there's more of those kind of commuters living in the town. And then the other pieces of the existing shortage is also unfilled jobs. So that's just a data point that we kind of looked up for the county, and it has it has Keystone specific, or we took a share of Keystone to just say all right, these are jobs that are not being filled, and in theory, that's likely because there's not housing available. So that factors into the existing shortage. And then there's also overcrowding and temporary housing. So if there are any units in our data, we find that are, more than more than two people per room. I forget the exact number, but just overcrowding, and then temporary housing, which is people living in camper vans, cars, things of that nature. And the overcrowding and temporary housing, there was little to none of that.
Yes,
Question.
we didn't have that here. so-
I noticed it said 0, but I do remember twice over the last X number of years, say 8 years, Vail Resorts has requested putting bunks in our Keystone employee housing in order to accommodate their spikes and difficulty creating new apartments, et cetera, for them. And I remember hitting it twice, and if I do the math roughly on your other data in there, the 0 number you use for overcrowding seems a little odd.
Yeah.
Comparing it to a little bit of history. Any idea why is it just because that was a 2 years, 1 a year spike spread over the last 10 years?
The ACS data for small areas like this is a 5-year average.
Okay. That explains it.
It's a 5-year average, and there are some pretty big margins of errors when you start to look at, just being totally honest, when you start to look at some of the finer grained statistics in there. So we, in a place like this, we're looking at we want to look at big patterns, big trends.
Right.
I'll complicate this even more for you. If some of the Vail Resorts housing are dorms, if they're not dwelling units, they won't be counted in some of the housing data. Because
Yeah,
they're
considered
they're group quarters.
And that's the case in that for tenderfoot. I just got a text from Steve. Steve
Yep.
Jacobson does have a question.
Yeah, Steve?
Yep.
Go ahead.
Yep. Hi, everybody. Just help me get comfortable with the numbers here. So you've got 467 units needed by 2035, 433 existing, 33 projected. It's hard for me to believe that only 33 are projected between now and 2035. What am I missing in the math or the definitions? Because it just seems very low to me.
Yeah, you're not wrong. It's the 33 units are based on job growth.
Okay.
Avery, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, go for it.
More light on that. So like Ryan said, the 33 units is based on projected job growth, which we pull averages from the county's growth. We look at historical growth in Keystone, and kind of what we found is that because it's kind of a built-out community, there's not a lot of new businesses, new industries. There's not, partly limited by the lack of housing growth. There's just not a lot of projected increase in employment in the area. The ski resort isn't expected to grow significantly, and that's where most of the employment would come from.
Yeah, project.
I'm sorry, real quick. Is Kindred figured into these numbers here?
Specific development projects?
Yeah, well, Kindred, I mean, it's a big project. There's going to be a lot of labor required. There's 3-4 restaurants, obviously the hotel portion.
We haven't done what we would call a bottom up forecast like that, where we take individual projects and factor those in. I mean, we're just taking I can't remember what growth rate we use, but we're looking at current jobs, and do you remember what employment growth rate we used for it?
Like the number or where we got it from?
Yeah, like just the specific growth rate, like what percent per year did we
It
grow
was
at?
like in 8. or
Point, like
something.
less than 1% per year job growth.
Yeah.
And,
You got to be careful of outliers, which this is, as you look at your projections, it does averages, better than I do over whatever, 10, 20-year period. I think you
Yeah.
just have to be careful of outliers like the Kindred, because if we look at this and we set a program or policy on future development where we're trying to hit that 33 number, we could
Yeah.
miss it by a big amount. Kindred opens and that I'm making it up. This 33 becomes 133. So I want to just be careful that we just don't, I'm not saying the numbers are wrong. I'm just saying I'm pointing to one thing that's going to be open in less than a year, and
Yeah.
it's going to skew all these numbers. So that's my thought on this.
I bet if you talk to them, they would be happy to be,
Yeah.
included
Sure.
with their projected numbers, et cetera. I think that it's just, I mean, what's been a bigger project than that?
We have about 8
Yeah.
different projects over the last 3 years, that being one of the biggest of the whole bunch. But there
Yeah,
are others that are pretty good size when you add them together.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, it's just,
that goes against our build out target
Yeah.
of another
Yeah.
almost 50% more units in Keystone are potential in our build out compared to where we are today, even though if you do the math of where we're roughly at 70%, and I know we're going to get some new updates on that, so the number may shift some.
Yeah.
There's also known, as Stephen mentioned, there are known things over the last couple of years, and depending on where we draw the line or where we're doing the calculation, I'd like to know how many of those various things are in that bucket today versus those that are literally being sold today and I may not occupy, therefore by definition, they're not in this. And because we did it 6 months ago, 6 years ago, how much of the 200 plus units-ish over the last less than a year and a half that are going to be either right now coming online or already are online, how much of that, what we're trying to hit a moving target, it's always tricky. I just kind of want to know where the dividing line is because as Stephen mentioned, we've got a bunch of stuff that's potentially coming online. And almost by definition, since a number of what you're talking about is not the Keystone Resort, but rather support for lodging is a key piece of a great deal of, if I got the percentages, over 50%. So I'd hate to, if it's 30 and we're seeing a build out, pretty good ramp of build out going on over the last 2-3 years. Are we underestimating the build out and the effect it has on that number?
Yeah. And one quick follow-up on that, because, as you fast forward to the end of the story, you've got different options and opportunities we should look at. That number, if that 33 becomes 133 or 233, I may have a different opinion on what the next steps are. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm not worried about the one-off that happens and you've averaged that in. This is a huge outlier and that's why I'm bringing it up. So.
Okay.
I'm
Good
done.
point, Steve.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
I want to reiterate a couple of points. Like we could spend probably an entire meeting just on this table. And this is the draft.
Yeah.
And we may need to revisit it again with you because there's a lot of policy embedded in this too, like the commuting assumption.
Right.
So the report has a much more detailed breakdown of how these numbers are derived. I want to make sure we get to kind of the policy recommendations and because there's going to be a lot to talk about there. And remember, this is a little bit of, I hate to say this, it's a little bit of a check the box with the state. We also want to make sure it's something you're comfortable with. So.
Why don't you keep going? Because that.
What date is the first of the year? What would the date statutorily we have to provide?
When you have to,
Submit the report.
oh man, I don't know. Because you have to submit it to DOLA. Right, you have to accept it and submit it to
And the other
DOLA.
thing for
Find out.
clarification, Peter broached the topic, either directly or indirectly, but the Mountain House neighborhood, which is not in the town limits, was that factor backed out? Or how did you address the Mountain House? Because that is most of the growth that is left, but
Yeah.
currently is not in the town limits.
That's not in here.
Okay, because let's talk.
That explains a lot. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good, very good point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's hard to think about housing in a jurisdictional boundary because
Yeah.
housing markets don't follow jurisdictional boundaries. What's next on here? Okay, draft recommendations. Got 4 buckets and I wanted to read something so I don't forget it. Let's see. We've kind of got 4 categories of recommendations. The first one is funding. If you're talking about housing, money doesn't go very far. And so thinking about if the town should consider some additional funding sources. Land use regulations. We'll talk about that. So if you should think about putting some things in your code to require new development to address affordable housing. And then the last category, thinking about what we call, I heard a good word for this the other day, is like gentle infill and housing preservation. So deed restriction acquisitions or buy downs, and then and accessory dwelling units. So that all those are kind of in the context of you're small, don't have a lot of land, don't have a lot of money or resources. So let's go into the, and I kind of think the focus for you based on your resources, maybe the more granular approaches of ADU incentives and the buy downs. But let's talk about it. Let's see where you guys are thinking. So this one here, every community, you're in a region where housing's been worked on for 30 plus years, right? There's a lot going on. A lot of the other jurisdictions have really well developed housing policies. So there are tons of models to look at. We don't have an exhaustive, inventory of what everybody's doing here, but for the most part, most communities have dedicated funding, whether it's through the Summit Combined 5A and 5B tax, which you now get, or at other STR fees or other taxes. So a lot of people, they're putting more resources to it when they have the support to go to the voters to ask for more resources. Fees you can pass by ordinance. So considering, and I don't remember, in the back of my head, it was said that maybe the town was considering an additional lodging tax. Is that true or not true? I might be making it up.
Yeah, I don't think we know that.
Yep. So that's something to consider, is whether the town, if housing is enough of a priority, that combined with other capital needs, there are other capital needs as the comprehensive plan is going to identify that you may want to consider additional funding sources for. And that's a really difficult political decision that I can't make for you. Right. So that's one thing to consider. Kind of easier is, the dedicated funding is the best way to address housing, because it is, you have annual money that you can budget for, you can plan programs around, you can do development with. And in contrast to the land use regulations we're going to talk about. Nibbling around the edges a little bit, you could adopt some formal incentives for affordable housing development that might qualify for certain fee waivers, density bonuses, expedited permitting. With costs what they are here, that'll help. It's not going to move the needle.
So since we inherited the Summit County Code, we inherited some of its already characteristics in that area. So saying we don't have it bothers me a little bit, because I know, for example, density bonuses were used for workforce housing to go from 12 to 14 units on one of the things this commission reviewed. So there are already a few things in place like that. Is that accurate?
That is, and council does have the ability to waive some fees.
Okay.
So
We'll tighten this up. Yeah. So this is the first step. So that's something to think about. Next, I think I'll just go through these and we'll talk.
Yeah.
Yeah. Next one. So land use regulations. So do you all know what an inclusionary housing inclusionary housing is, or inclusionary zoning?
I think it would be good if you told us.
Sure. So it requires that new development provide a percentage of the units in the project as affordable. So if you had a 10% inclusionary housing requirement, a 100-unit project would have to provide 10 units as affordable. And you can define what income levels and a whole bunch of other things they would have to meet. The other one are affordable housing impact fees, or in mountain communities, they're often called linkage fees. They link the job generation from new development to the housing demand. They're a form of an impact fee. And so they're charged per square foot usually, and the money goes to affordable housing. Now the downside, so these programs, communities that have had them in effect for 20, 30 years, they've generated a fair amount of development, but they only work when you're getting development. And so in a community like this, I think there's thought to be done on whether that would have enough of an impact to be worthwhile here, depending how much. And there are other ways to go at it. So annexation policy is one. Breckenridge has an annexation policy that requires, it's so staggering to me, 80% of the units in a project to be affordable if you're going to annex into the town. So you can use annexation agreements, development agreements, other ways of getting voluntary, there's legalese here, but other ways of getting voluntary contributions to affordable housing from new development. And that may be, we talked with I'm not a lawyer, we've talked with your legal advisors about that, but that's something to think about. I think there's a little bit of thought with staff on whether land use regulations are the way to go in this context, and for you to think about as well. What's next? Then deed restriction incentive program, which is a lot. It's a mouthful, so I'm just going to call them buy downs. It's debatable. Some people consider a buy down, buying an entire home, buying an entire apartment building. Some lump these deed restriction acquisitions into buy down programs. It's easier to say buy down, so we're going to say that. So there are a lot of these programs already in place in Summit County. So it's offering someone cash to voluntarily place a deed restriction on their home. And
Fascinating. Could I just ask you, so would it be then an existing homeowner gets the cash and says, I agree to make my home deed restriction, but then they could keep that home forever.
Yep.
It's only once they decide to sell it that then it becomes deed restriction.
It's a bit of a long game.
It's a long game.
And
it changes the nature of that property.
Yeah, I'll get into that. It's cheaper. It's a lot cheaper to do that than to try to develop new affordable housing.
Yeah.
Development costs per unit are probably I'm totally shooting from the hip, probably $500,000 to $700,000 a unit up here. And the deed restriction programs will pay 15 to 25% of the appraised value of the home for different levels of deed restriction. Okay. Many of them, some of them don't have appreciation caps. It's just restricting you to being a full-time resident with employment in the area, in the region, maybe recently retired, but with an employment history locally, not someone that, moved here to retire. Some of them have appreciation caps on resale, some of them don't. So the idea is that it screens out the second home market. So by screening out the second home market, you're naturally kind of constraining the sale price to keep it more attainable. Not necessarily affordable, but more attainable. It's more of a middle income, middle and upper income local strategy, right?
And that also
It's
pertains
interesting.
to having more full-time residents too.
Yeah.
That 80 to 120 midsection.
Yeah.
And lots of,
Very intriguing to me, yeah.
yeah, talk with the staff in Breckenridge that have been doing this for a while, or in Vail. And I don't want to overgeneralize, but an example of someone who might take advantage of it might be someone who maybe is upside down in their mortgage or has a major repair they need to do that they can't afford to do, and they're at risk of losing their home. And that infusion of cash helps them address those problems and stay in their home. And then you've preserved a home for future locals.
Right, okay.
So they've become very
Yeah,
popular.
yeah, sure. Go ahead.
When you're done,
No, I'm done.
Yeah, go ahead.
if 70% of the housing units in Keystone are multifamily units, I don't know. Homeowner can be a condo owner and a multi-unit kind of thing, but what does that do to the condo that the five of us own the 5 units in a condo building? And
Yeah.
one of us decides to do a deed restricted. What does that do to the other people? How does that
Good
generally
question.
affect?
Good question. And I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
My unit is a condo in Ski Run. We have 42 units and 3 of them are deed restricted. And the restriction is that you have to work in the county, and it doesn't really it hasn't had an effect.
It doesn't have an economic effect, you think, on
The rest of
the rest of the other units?
They pay the same HOA rates.
Right.
Sometimes they have STR restrictions, therefore it does have an economic effect because it
Yeah.
effectively takes out certain units from the pool of rentable. And, from STR perspective, therefore slightly driving up the price depending on the ratios and the value and the STR capability of the other units.
Actually, same, yeah.
Just teeter-totter,
I think I think it's a pretty granular strategy.
Yeah.
When you think about how much money you have to work with, and how many people might want to participate in the program, I don't think it's like it's going to create a sweeping, transformation in the town.
But it's a tool.
It's a tool.
Yes.
And I think the other communities we've worked with that are looking at these programs, they look at their communities and they look at the neighborhoods that are a little more heavily weighted to locals.
Right.
And they promote the programs in those types of areas.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And then my second question is well, you haven't gotten to the ADUs yet. I'll hold that.
It's okay. If there are no more, yeah, so I think, that this is, and we need to work a little bit more with Summit Combined on this because they have a lot of programs in this area to learn how you could potentially integrate with those. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. There's already a lot of things going on in Summit County, and we have a meeting with them next week. We weren't able to squeeze it in before today. So, and so that's something to think about. Think about where in the community that might make sense, who might be interested.
And then is the money like that we would get from these different, we had previous slides talking about getting, we would use that money would be what paid
Yep.
the homeowner.
Yeah, I think you could probably use your 5A, 5B money for that.
Okay.
You could use affordable housing impact fees for it. You can use general fund for it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Do have a general question about short-term value and cost versus long-term. By definition, the Summit County Housing Authority enforces a lot of the rules. Therefore, there is cost associated with that forever. If it's a deed restriction, there's somebody has to review something based on all the rules.
Yeah.
That costs money. What I have absolutely no clue of is what does that really cost?
Yeah, you have to admit.
Versus the immediate value versus, I'm a little worried where over time, those costs can go up because they're usually human related, i.e. inflation tied. Whereas we may have something immediate, $30,000 grant against something or another, but then you have to monitor it literally forever.
Yeah.
So is that a little concerned about the 30,000 you might give somebody to deed restrict and the fact that it costs 10 to $100 a year to monitor that, but over 30 years, all of a sudden you're taking a dent out of that
Yeah.
value.
Anyone feel free if you know more about what's going on locally, but sometimes small communities will partner with a regional entity like Summit Combined.
We
That's what
do.
we do.
To do that.
And, via us being part of the program, they do the monitoring. We would obviously have to do the enforcement portion of it. So.
That is something we think about is the monitoring and compliance. Like a lot of small communities don't really want to own affordable housing on their own because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of compliance work, monitoring, tracking. So definitely thinking about it.
In your conversation, I would love to hear their response to that kind of concern. and maybe fold it into the data that we have
Yeah.
and the information.
Yeah, there's some fleshing out to do. We wanted to have a initial conversation with you all before this gets a little more baked. I don't want to just throw it over the fence. All right, we good here? Anyone online have questions on this or thoughts before we go to ADUs? Well, just if you change your mind.
Oh, wait, Kathy?
This is Kathy Rogg, and I'm wondering, number one is what, if, the earlier discussion when Steve was talking about the kindred and the growth that was gonna, in jobs that would be due to that. And we don't have any authority to get any linkage with the resort, as far as I know. And I think that the Mountain House is probably, is in the not too distant future, is going to be some big development back in on the resort part of it. So I don't know when you, I guess that's maybe a policy consideration of, as to whether, if Kindred develops, 100 new jobs just because of that place, since we can't do anything to compel them to have some affordable housing, how does the resort and Keystone, how it can operate to do a lot of the assessment? Your assessment.
Lindsay?
Well, sort of. Let me just,
Yeah.
I gotta be careful on how I say this. The Keystone Resort PUD, in which Kindred is actually in that zoning category. And if you recall, that document is very complex. But there is a component of that, while I'm not gonna call it an impact fee, there are requirements associated with development and number of units and square footage that have to be complied with via the zoning document. So there was, that development couldn't have happened without securing enough, in this case, beds associated with what it will generate.
Okay.
And that was a county level restriction and monitoring at the time when it was
Yes.
approved, because I know we transitioned.
Yes, but if it were to come in today, we would have to abide by the same regulations.
Right.
So that reminds me, then my comments about doing inclusionary zoning or linkage, we need to probably rethink that a little bit based on the PUD.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not so easy.
It's not inclusionary.
Yeah.
I got a follow-up question.
Sure, Steve,
Steve.
go ahead.
Yeah. So I just wanted to go back to the first comment. So just a simple example of my concern with the jobs is I'm not sure the numbers are reflecting reality. Give you an example. We've been out every month, and last month we went to the Line, and we went there twice over a 2-week period. Food was great, but there was one bartender, and only one server for all the tables. So when you show the jobs that were short, I'm not even sure how you would even know that information. And that concerns me that it's just not, this isn't an outlier. And I think it's prevalent, because whether it's Kickapoo or the others, that's where we go eat. And I'm in hospitality and the food and beverage side, and I'm like, they don't have enough people. And so I don't know. It's just, I'm concerned that, again, that the numbers in here aren't reflecting exactly what's really happening. And we may impose a policy or a mindset of how we move forward with other developments and we might not be doing it right. So that's kind of in a roundabout way my concern.
Heard. We did not invent the methodology that the state, we gave them some guidance. Actually, we were on a team of consultants that gave some guidance on how to implement this legislation, but this sort of method that they want you to use to estimate housing need, you know, it's not perfect. I would just,
Right.
numbers grow legs and they get out there.
Right.
Yeah.
So we want to try to find a balance of refining these to better reflect your view of the community,
Right.
meeting the requirements and communicating somehow that they are not by any means perfect.
Yeah. Is there a way, because I'm thinking, listening to this, like there's so many variables that we're never going to be able to actually capture statistically. And you obviously are doing this in a certain way to comply with the state law. It can't, for our purposes, planning, we obviously bring to this our own knowledge of Kindred and the restaurant businesses and stuff.
Yeah.
Is that something, I mean, can we just sort of have that as an overlay and not be too, not, have maybe some footnotes to the numbers, but
Yeah.
for our purposes, I'm thinking Steve and Kathy, that we can look at it more, at a higher level in terms of, we know we need to do things for housing. We don't, whether it's 33 or 133, it's
Right.
still, do you see what I'm saying?
No, that's a good
Trying to
point.
get our cake and eat it too,
Yeah.
love that idea.
Exactly
of
that,
A
yeah.
separate
Yeah.
section.
Yes,
That which is
Just-
required by the state is a standalone piece.
exactly.
Yeah,
That's
but there's maybe a whole section in our document that talks about, here are the major considerations over and above that.
Mhm.
That way we meet the state, they understand, and we document the limitations that we're aware of
Yeah,
and say, hey, we don't even know on this because this could be a significant problem. Transferable development rights in and out of the town of Keystone over to the neighboring Summit County development areas. If we don't annex, oh my gosh, that can make a real headache with regards to understanding what requirements we would have versus the county would put on something. And if they transfer rights.
Totally.
So there's a whole series, and we brought up a number of them that I would love to
Kind of
capture.
like a separate goal for Keystone, maybe? Is that what you're thinking?
No,
It's
just
more just
literally a
like
section, a
yeah.
whole.
what more fluid, allows fluidity. 'Cause
Yeah,
if
yes,
there's,
because that's-
there's
I think that's
outliers
what
that are
everyone's saying.
bringing on change.
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe it could just be, doesn't have to be anything huge.
You
Just
could even
something to
quantify it or bracket it, saying this
Yeah.
kind of consideration
Yeah,
could be
sure.
1 unit to 500 units.
Yeah.
The fact that we have build out limitations existing in the town of Keystone right now could be a significant one, hard to push because it's a bowl of jello. You push on one port, it can move in another with transferable rights. But we could at least kind of bracket it if you get some basic ideas. I know we're not going to be able to nail down because of the lack of data. So it's a
Right.
great idea to have that separation.
And
Yeah, and I have one more follow-up.
Steve, and then I know you're trying to, go ahead, Steve, are you good?
Yeah, no, I have one more quick follow-up, and this is more of a comment.
You're next.
The thing that was probably the most disturbing fact as I read through all this is, first of all, 80% of the full-time households are renters, but that a quarter of them are severely burdened. And when you look at severely burdened, I'm like, they're barely living from check to check. If you kind of look back at what that to me was like an eye opener for me. I don't know about everybody else, but I just wanted to comment on that.
Yes.
That's a concern too.
It's helpful to know that, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All
Go
right.
ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I didn't bring it up before, but help me to understand. I appreciate the part about the catch-up, or the projected need part,
Yeah.
discussing those numbers and how that could fluctuate. But if our existing shortage is total 433 and the projected is 33, it's a huge magnitude of difference.
It is.
I mean,
Right.
seems to me the big thing is we already got a huge problem.
Yes,
How are we
yes,
going to address
yes,
that huge
yes.
problem, let
Absolutely.
alone the little problem
Yes,
that
I
could be
agree.
a
Could be bigger.
measuring, could
Yeah.
be much bigger,
Yes.
But you're not alone.
Exactly. No, exactly. So
And-
no matter what, it's a big number.
big problem.
Yes.
Yeah. okay.
And when we
Yeah.
You know, like these methods of estimating need have been
Yeah.
around for a while.
Yeah.
And like this state methodology kind of does build on a lot of work that housing consultants have used over the years. But there's a pattern that emerges pretty consistently is that in the mountain towns and pretty much everywhere, like the existing shortages, the existing need is far greater than the keep up.
Yeah.
And no community has ever had the resources
Right.
to be able to address all of it.
Well, look at the national numbers.
Yeah.
It's anywhere between 5 and 7 million, depending on who you source. I mean, you're never gonna catch that.
Yeah, like what, let's just use round numbers. If it's $500,000 a unit, which is probably way low, to build affordable housing in Summit County times what they're short of 400 units,
1233.
That's 200 million,
$200 million.
which is actually my next comment.
I don't think our
So
our different funding mechanisms are gonna cover it. Yeah.
That's why
Anyway.
we're talking about
go-
Our entire
let's-
budget
yeah.
for the next
Do you have a list of risk takers?
50 years.
Yeah.
yeah, but
So-
take, you know, when you opportunities present themselves, you
Yeah.
take them. And the
Right.
recommendation that we forgot to put in here was talking about public-private partnerships and the potential
Oh,
for
yeah.
Yes.
of what, 5 acres that you might acquire?
Yeah.
Housing could be part of that.
Right.
Right.
And you wanted to we've really talked a lot about this. Let's move on to another topic.
Yeah.
Not
So
not
last
more
one.
numbers. Okay, Jim.
Okay.
Last slide, good, yeah.
Yeah. So this is something to think about. You know, you could use your funding to develop grant or loan programs for ADUs. They're not cheap. And I don't want to, you know, sugarcoat that these are going to, you know, sweep the town over and there's going to be ADU on every corner because most, you know, just figure $500 a square foot in construction costs, 700 square foot ADU, that's $350,000. Most people don't have that sitting around on hand. So, but if we the idea behind ADUs is that if the thinking that's come around is that you want to remove barriers. People that are interested in improving housing,
Right.
they set their policies to just remove barriers and give people the option to do them if they want. And then if you can offer some financial incentives, all the better.
Go ahead.
So my question on the ADU part is ADUs doesn't apply to multifamily units, I presume. A
Right.
condo isn't going to put a tiny
No.
home in their parking lot.
Probably not.
But a single family homeowner, the idea is opening that up to them.
Yeah.
But a lot of single family homes are in HOAs and HOAs have rules and perhaps
Yep.
limit that in the general scheme of things. Do ADU supporting measures supersede HOAs? Is it state law? Is it a county, is it a Keystone regulation that says you must allow it to happen? Or where does that shake out?
Rachel, our ADU
Yeah, we'd
expert.
have to have Jennifer, Jennifer could tell us.
So there are issues with HOA covenants. They might not allow them. So again, I'm not saying that this is a silver bullet. So some HOA covenants may prohibit them, and then you have to amend the HOA covenants. Some of them require maybe a supermajority to amend the covenants.
It's tough.
It's hard.
But it's an incremental. And-
It's a piece.
Yes.
It's another tool.
Yeah. So like put it in perspective. If you have $1 million a year in 5A and B money from Summit Combined, let's do some math. Let's say a deed restriction incentive. What's the median condo price? 800-ish?
Yeah, I think it would, yes.
All right, we're gonna do math on the fly. We don't like to do
Sorry.
that, but maybe someone is smarter than me can do it faster. You seem good at this. So let's say an $800,000 condo, we're gonna pay a 20% deed restriction. So that's $160,000 to buy that deed restriction. You got $1 million a year. That's what, 8 of them that maybe you could do if you can find people to
Right.
do them. Or if you fully funded a $350,000 ADU, that's 3 ADUs a year. So these programs are more granular or smaller scale.
It's bit by bit.
One of the things I wondered about, thinking about ADUs, is you know, do we have very much housing stock that it would really work with?
Yeah.
I don't think we do. And so I sort of thought
Is the
maybe
juice worth the
it's worth
squeeze?
brain power.
So Diane, great question. You're right. The single family component of housing stock currently in the town limits is relatively small. With that being said, though, the ones that I'm thinking about, there was enough foresight when they were zoned to allow these single families. A lot of them have the ability to permit ADUs and caretaker units. So, I don't know this for sure, but I would say a majority of the single-family subdivisions currently allow ADUs. Now, with that being said, the CCNRs or the restrictions by the HOA, we don't touch. And they could restrict them. I guess they do.
There may be I can't remember what the state legislation is, the status of that is. There may be state legislation coming to supersede HOA restrictions on.
Yeah. I feel like I read about that.
Yeah. I know that the state of Vermont allows.
You know, one other data point in the ranch, most of those are what called drip line lots, which are deliberately designed to restrict the footage, the footprint
The
of
building
any
envelope.
building.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
even if you overcome the covenants and some of the other things, they don't own the land.
Yeah.
So just FYI,
Yeah.
there's a third of our housing in the entire Keystone area roughly is in the ranch. Give or take a little bit.
And let's
ranch.
assume that it is allowed, and let's assume that they maximize their building envelope, which in most cases they did. With that being said, think a little bit out of the box in the fact that they don't have to be detached. So
Yeah.
house in the ranch is 4,500 with a basement, it could be potentially converted to an ADU.
Separate entrance,
Yeah.
a lot of walkouts there.
And I
Yeah.
guess, and
That's a
yeah,
good point.
yeah,
Same building.
we got to
footprint.
remember, it's all, the more
Yeah.
tools we have, the better, yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Kathy, did you have something?
Yeah,
Yeah. Go ahead.
actually, I guess it's one of the tools, but Love and Pass Village, for example, the lot size, or we have very small lots, less than, a lot of them, some of them are a tenth of an acre or less, and there are setbacks, the town council even has granted different setbacks, but so there's been proposals, for example, to convert a shed, an attached shed to a house as a ADU, and I don't know how you can do that, and unless we had kind of setbacks that were like 5 feet apart or something. So I don't think it would work, and we don't have an HOA. So
Places that are getting, the places that are really being aggressive on ADUs, they're removing a lot of those density restrictions. They're loosening setback requirements. They're eliminating lot coverage requirements. Like Crested Butte is looking at doing some really innovative things on ADUs. Like they're looking, their housing shortages are, probably some of the worst, right? And they're constrained. They're looking at ideas like 2 ADUs on a lot. No FAR, no FAR limits, things like that.
So I think thank you very much.
Sure.
Let me just say that I know this is exhausting for you all.
Okay.
Thank you. It was a very
We
comprehensive,
signed up for.
yeah, it was wonderful.
So I would like to just note on Kathy's comment.
Yeah.
Very valid. let's see, how do I do this? Loveland Pass Village is a bit of an eclectic neighborhood. It is one of the oldest neighborhoods currently within the town limits.
Right.
And maybe, my knee-jerk response, and it's a little bit in the weeds with regards to what we're doing tonight, but that neighborhood is likely more prone to the buy down. Than
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the exact kind of
Right.
area I'm thinking about for the
So-
buy-down programs.
Right. No, it's interesting that the idea that like if we have a mix of things and if we have obviously a lot of diverse areas within Keystone, it's nice to have different options to address the
And
problem.
that would support the notion of keeping locals.
Yes,
So-
yes. I had just one overarching thing that I don't want to forget to mention, just with the report. I thought it would be, since it's, so when you look at, when you first open it and you see that it was 56 pages.
Yeah.
The first thing I looked for was like.
The summary.
Summary.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to mention that. I thought it might just be
100%.
something that you haven't done yet, but
Yeah.
that'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank
We
you.
wanted to make you,
Yeah, 'cause
but to
it's
get to the
like-
recommendations.
Yeah, thank you.
And I know we're trying to wrap up
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Wendy, you and I have had multiple conversations with regards to senior housing. So how does senior housing fit into this?
Thank you.
Does it have any requirements as it relates to senior housing and this? Is there any correlation
I
whatsoever?
don't think, oh boy, I have to go back and look at, I don't know if they asked for anything specific on senior housing.
Because all your numbers, our numbers,
Yeah.
are certainly indicating that the average age is going up.
Yeah,
And
Statewide.
is it a part of what we need to provide?
yeah.
I believe.
I mean, we
it
can
is.
think
But is
about-
it part of the study? I don't know.
Well, it can be, we can, I mean, every mountain town's getting older and so if that's a policy area you want us to explore, we can.
You should explore it certainly for state and policy compliance, okay? But we've had our studies, we're actually commissioning another one now.
Mhm.
I head up a senior housing effort here in Summer
Okay.
County and,
Talk more.
and it's, the numbers are staggering.
Yeah.
The accumulated unmet need. And what happens is that needs unmet, you move, you leave,
Yeah,
you leave.
So would you define
Yeah.
what you're working on? Is it independent living? Is
All,
it
all aspects of continuum.
the whole
Senior,
thing?
yeah, let's just broadly define it
Mhm.
as retirement and up
Yeah.
to assisted living and rehabilitation care even. Yeah,
Seniors,
I didn't mean to pull you off topic.
yeah, but that's,
Again, is it a component of what we're looking at from the state's perspective?
I need to get clarification on that.
yeah,
I don't
I'd
think
really
it
like
is.
that.
I don't think it is.
That'd be
It's
great.
just based on
Well,
income
Yeah, it's,
study.
yeah, I think you're right.
But just the hardcore demographics.
Yeah.
I'm just looking here at your commentary near the end of the report on diversifying housing.
Mhm.
For residents beyond employee housing. To me, it's take a look at who's occupying the residences here full-time.
Sure.
And your 65 plus age cohort is rapidly increasing here in that.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. And we maybe have a separate conversation to learn a little more.
And if it's helpful, I can share the study we had done.
Yeah, that'd be great.
It's been published.
Yeah. That reminds me,
Actually,
I mean, the
make
other,
it available to the commission?
Well, I
Or is
have
it
to
not
be,
done yet?
because the Summit Daily News asked for the whole thing, and all
Oh.
I did was give them the demographics, the next thing I know, it's a front page story, but you know what, Kit Gary did a fabulous job. Maybe it's because I met with her in person 3 times and made sure she was
yeah. awesome.
comprehended, but she gets it, yeah.
The other thing I don't know the answer to yet, is in this whole state housing needs assessment framework, there's local needs assessments and regional needs assessments.
Mm.
And so Summit Combined did their regional one a couple years ago, but it was before the legislation. And the regional needs assessments are broader and when we talk to them, it will be important to, I think, for us to talk to them a little bit more about like when's their next regional needs assessment and how can Keystone be part of that? And so I think, I kind of see this one as like helping you figure out what your role in the world is and role in housing is. And then that regional needs assessment is going to, I don't know, it may not be as specific to you, but it might address some of these bigger topics. I
Well,
agree with you on senior housing. We can take a look at it.
and a big topic here is how do we become more of a permanent community?
Right.
A town, okay? I mean, that, we heard that over and over and in all the community sessions. So, that's a big part of it.
Creating and preserving housing is a big piece of that.
Yeah, sure.
That's all we got.
Lindsay,
Well,
I have a question on timing. You are going to be updating the forecast build out that the county gave us because it was at least a year and a half old now, if not more. You're going to do an update. I'd like to know timing wise, when do you think that might be completed and how that might affect what we're talking about here? Because it seems like build out is one big ingredient to the whole pie here. Any guess when that'll be available?
Jessica is working on that, and we are almost at the finish line.
So a few weeks, this will be a few weeks. Great timing. Sounds good. Thanks.
Again, I really want to thank you all very much.
We got some good takeaways from this.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think there was lots and lots of good discussion. So we do really appreciate your work. And I think maybe with that, we'll wrap up this portion of the meeting.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Take a break. This was a marathon.
Yeah. And then we have just, our only other agenda item was the SE.
SE Group is going to give us a very quick update.
Okay.
Gordon is online,
All right.
and
Wonderful.
He's going to tell us what has transpired relatively recently over the last month
Okay.
and what is ahead of us.
Okay. Super.
So,
Hi, everyone. So let's see. Jess, it looks like can you all hear me? Perfect. I was wondering. Well, sorry I couldn't be there in person, but it's nice to be here with you all. Thank you, Brian and Avery. That was,
Oh, the very
I got
top. No, I got you. Sorry. You're just blurred a little. That's okay. Hi there.
Okay. You all can hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, great. Well, thanks, Brian and Avery. I got the chance to listen into that. That was really informative and yeah, I think good feedback. So just wanted to give you all a little bit of an update about what SE Group, what we've been up to since we last checked in with you all in June. So we made the edits and incorporated the feedback that we received from you all on the 3 Mile Plan. We've been doing some site visits, just kind of ground truthing some of the recommendations that we're hoping to provide you all.
Bigger.
Oh, perfect. Nice.
Sorry. We can see you better now, so it's much better.
Great. I love that. Well, it's like I'm there in person. So we are starting to ground truth some of the recommendations that we're preparing for you all regarding connectivity and transportation, understanding that's a big point of contention for your residents. And also we held an open house in July that was there in the room that you're sitting in now. And then Lindsay and Jess and I had a booth at the Bluegrass and Beers Festival in August, early August, which was really great. We got the chance to meet a lot of people that have not showed up to past events that are part-time residents that were here. So that was a really good opportunity to hear from them. And we've been getting a lot of feedback in the community survey. So next slide, please. The community survey update, so I'll pause for a second and just let you know that in the background this week, I've been preparing an engagement summary report that I'm preparing to send to Lindsay tomorrow afternoon. And it is quite comprehensive because as you can see here, we've got nearly 300 responses to the survey, which is enormous. We've got 155 responses from full-time residents, 120 from part-time residents, 23 responses from people that work in Keystone but do not live in Keystone, which I think is also incredibly valuable. And just as a little caveat, I will say that we did get 27 people that responded that don't live or work in Keystone, which, not entirely sure why they took the survey in the first place. One thing that we can see on the back end is that a number of incomplete responses. And when you start to do a little bit of the math, you realize that a lot of the incomplete survey responses do come a little bit from probably the end of the people that are in that 27 group, but we were able to filter them out, so they're not going to skew the data. But it is interesting, right? So anyway, we got quite a lot of responses, and so what I'm preparing in the background is a summary report of all the engagement that we've heard to date, and so that includes feedback that we heard at the various open house events that we've held, as well as summary statistics from the community survey to date. And so just a quick little also note that we're prepared to keep the survey open through the end of September. So more responses may come in. So this is a bit of a snapshot in time, and whatever feedback that we get on the survey over the next month, we'll make sure to update the engagement report when the survey is closed. So you have that data as well. But for now, if you go to the next slide, I'll just give you a little bit of just an overview of some of the feedback that we're hearing. So this is just a little bit of selected demographics from some of the participants that we're seeing. So the length of time that people have lived in Keystone, we're getting a lot of people responding that have actually been here for quite a long time. As you can see in this pie chart on the left, the sort of tealish green color, there's 23.4% of respondents have been there for more than 20 years. Almost 20% have been there been in Keystone 11 to 20 years, and about 17% have been there for 6 to 10 years. And then 24.5%, 2 to 5 years, and then 15.7% less than 2 years. So we're getting a lot of responses from people that have been in the community for quite a long time, which is really interesting too, just to kind of have that historical perspective, I think, represented in the survey is really important. Some of the household characteristics we're getting sort of following a little bit in line with some of the demographic trends that you've probably seen now between various touch points that my team has had with you and some of the reporting that you've seen from EPS, is that we about 60% are couples that are either don't have children at home, that are empty nesters, or couples with no children. And then we have about 15% are single person households. And then those smaller fractions there, our percentages, are folks that are households with children under 18, households with part-time or visiting grandchildren, and unrelated individuals living together. So it does a little bit start to track alongside some of the demographic makeup in the town. I'll pause here and just ask if there's any questions so far.
Peter?
We're good, Dylan. Go ahead.
Cool, I'll keep on rolling. So next slide, please. All right. So this was one of the first questions that people come to that's kind of after the demographic information. So people are ranking Keystone as a place to be. And so as a place to live, a place to work, a place to raise children, a place to retire, a place to own a second home, and a place for overall quality of life. So it's a little bit interesting how it kind of shook out. So the options are poor, fair, good, great, or not sure. What's interesting to me is that some of the things that are maybe a little less positive or leaning less positive are the place to work and a place to raise children. I think one of the things that was a little interesting to me hearing the EPS presentation was the point about the number of people that are in commuting. So I'm wondering how much of some of that bias towards the place to work is a little bit coming from people that maybe don't feel like they have that same grounding in the sense of community because they're not there all the time. And also because it's, there's a lot of resort oriented work, and in some cases that can be really tricky work to do full time. And so what's interesting also is that in those areas, the place to raise children and the place to work, there's a pretty high percentage, 35%, 36% respectively, of people that indicated that they were not sure. And I think for the place to raise children, that kind of comes back a little bit to some of the demographic trends that we were seeing about, a relatively smaller share of the population of people that either have children living at home or are, or have visiting children. A lot of the other indicators were a lot more positive. So a place to live, almost half reported that Keystone is a great place to live. A place to retire at 46.7%, indicating that it's great. A place to own a second home, almost 60% are indicating that it's a great place to live. And I think interesting also seeing the number of housing units that are held as second homes. So that could be contributing a little bit. And so a place for overall quality of life, again, over half are representing that it's a place for overall quality of life. And I think, the lived experience of being in Keystone, right, from the folks that are there, you all know it's a fabulous place and it's beautiful. So I think, it's not surprising to see some of those positive indicators there. I'll pause and see if there's any reflections or questions.
I have a reflection. There's no school here.
Right.
So, when you're considering that you have to get your kids to a school that's farther away, then you look at other places.
Right.
My cove.
Very good point.
Mm-hmm.
Although the cove is real close.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dylan.
Well, okay, next slide. So this one is rating the quality of life of certain aspects of Keystone. So we've got feeling of safety, the ease of getting around, natural environment, the built environment. So that it can include the architecture, the sort of the layout of buildings, parks, the transportation system. There's a little bit of a catch-all category. Health and wellness opportunities, arts and cultural opportunities, social gathering opportunities, economic health, the sense of community, the image or town's reputation, and the parks and rec opportunities. So one thing that I think the things that maybe stood out to me were that the ones that kind of trended more negative in the data were the built environment. And I think when I look at some of the fill-in responses for some of the questions that came later in the survey, to me, a lot of that negativity is a little bit more skewed towards the transportation system portion of the built environment, right? I think there's a lot of people that are indicating that the safety of getting around and the confusion of Highway 6 is, I think, negatively skewing that particular component. And I think that's probably not news to any of you, and certainly not a big surprise to me there. But the thing that was interesting was that one of the things that showed up as a little bit more negative was the sense of community. When I looked at some of the data that we were getting in terms of the write-in responses at open houses, one of the things that people were sort of trending towards in their write-in responses was saying that they'd like to see Keystone, create more opportunities for social gathering and create a little bit more cohesiveness with the people that are living there. So I think that's just something to consider. And some of the things that are more positive was there was a feeling of safety. Almost 67% of survey respondents indicated that sense of safety in Keystone was great. The natural environment, including wildlife habitat and scenery, 77% indicated that it's great. And I think, something that stands out to me, of course, is I'm hearing a lot of people talk about that, they sometimes see moose in their backyard in the mornings, and how the great connection they have to the sense of the natural environment. So I think, that's not a big surprise there. Another one that was indicating is more positive was the image or reputation. So I think that was a kind of an interesting one. Then the rest was leaning more neutral, the ease of getting around, health and wellness opportunities, arts and culture. That surprised me a little bit, just because, as far as I can tell, your arts and culture scene, at least in the summer, is pretty good. The economic health was not as surprising to me that leaned a little bit more neutral. And then some of the recreation opportunities. I'll go ahead and do next slide just to make sure that we get through these and respect your time. But if there's major questions at the end, I'm happy to take them. So this question was more about how should the town prioritize its funding? So the category options here were transportation investments, including connectivity and safety, economic development and village revitalization, parks and recreation maintenance, upgrades and expansion. So thinking about like playgrounds opportunities or new trails, etc. Environmental stewardship and resilience initiatives. So that could mean things like home hardening and defense measures for wildfire. That could also mean things like flood mitigation, providing more affordable housing and increased housing stock. So kind of the earlier part of our discussion this evening. and more arts and cultural and community-centered events. And so as you can see that the three that received the most votes were parks and rec opportunities and maintenance upgrades, economic development, and transportation improvements. So I'll pause here and just see if there's any reflections on that or if that's surprising to anybody.
No, it's
Yeah,
not
it's-
surprising.
No surprise.
Yeah, not surprising.
Okay, well, next slide. So are there more fitness offerings that you want to see? So this was just kind of getting a sense around, the survey. We were a little strategic and we rolled out the survey after we held our first open house engagement in May. So trying to also understand a little bit around just pulse on the ground, what are we hearing? And some of the things that we'd heard from the RTAP engagement in March and some of the conversations that we had going into May was that folks were interested in, the rec path and trails, and also just feeling like, the access to open space and nature and Forest Service lands in Keystone was amazing, but there was something that was lacking was indoor rec opportunities or parks and playgrounds for families, things of that nature. So we wanted to make sure that, kind of leaning on that a little bit, that we made sure to include a question about, if we wanted to expand recreation opportunities in Keystone, what kind of things would people be interested in? So the options that people could respond with were indoor fitness space and recreation center, indoor courts and fields, pool and aquatics, playgrounds, ball fields, fitness and dance classes, youth and adult sports, public river access, hiking trails, mountain bike specific skills areas, picnic areas, other. I can pull the other write-in data so and the longer report. And I'm satisfied with the current offerings, was sort of the last one. As you can see, the ones that got the most opportunities were indoor fitness space and recreation center, which I was not super surprised by, hiking trails, and then public river access. And so those are the ones that kind of stood out the most in the responses. Then kind of going down a little bit, it was, opportunities for playgrounds and aquatics and mountain bike parks. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So this one was around economic development and revitalization opportunities. So the questions were around revitalization activation of Lakeside Village. So these folks could pick basically their top priorities for what they want to see sort of economic development opportunities happen in Keystone. And so activate and revitalize and activate of Lakeside Village, activate River Run Village with efforts to increase foot traffic in the off-season months. So thinking about those shoulder season months. Leverage natural and recreational amenities, history and arts and cultural assets to encourage tourism-related economic development, especially in warmer months. Wow, that's a mouthful. But I think an important question, especially on the heels of some of the the conversations and the work that the RTAP group did, trying to think a little bit about that sort of outdoor economy nexus there, and supporting the development of high quality commercial space to attract new business types, examine opportunities to site larger businesses, co-working spaces, or light industrial uses to grow Keystone's tax base and also probably diversify the economic pool. Invest in streetscape design and walk, bike, transportation projects that contribute to the appeal of commercial areas. And, you could also argue safety. And then other write-ins, which we'll include in the longer engagement report. And then none of the above, which, as we can see, got very little response. But the things that stood out the most were the investment in streetscape design and walk and bike transportation projects. So that was kind of informative for us as we're also thinking about sort of transportation opportunities, right? And opportunities for improved connectivity and improving pedestrian safety. And then revitalization and activation of Lakeside Village. That didn't surprise me that about 50% of respondents were choosing that as one of their top priorities, part just because that's something that anecdotally comes up every time we've held an open house meeting thus far. I'll pause there and see if there's any reflections on this slide or the last couple that I kind of just jumped through.
Dylan, one of the things
Yes.
I periodically hear, or actually almost every single time I talk to somebody, is a negative, which is I don't want to become Aspen. I don't want to become Vale. I don't want to become Breckenridge.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like the negatives, and that's pretty vague. In your talking with people, did you get an understanding of what they were alluding to? Do you feel like these numbers accurately captured it? Because I only got a very small sample when I talked to people, and I wanted to get your perspective.
Yeah, that's a good question, Peter. I'm glad you brought that up because some of the write-ins that I've just seen when I was going through the survey to pull all this data was some of the folks were responding, we don't want to be Breckenridge. And I think that's sort of the nearest example, kind of similar to what you're talking about. And so I've had some conversations with folks. At the last open house, there was a couple of folks that were really kind of driving that point particularly home. And my read of their position is that, when you think about places like Breckenridge or Vale, they do have a little bit more of this sort of walkable, either Main Street or kind of connected sort of situation. Whereas Keystone, you have the villages of River Run, Lakeside, and obviously Mountain House is not a part of the town of Keystone, but still within the sort of geographic location of Keystone, or at least the greater context. And not quite as easily connected, a little bit more separated. And I think the kind of the point behind the point that people are starting to iterate is that they like the feeling that Keystone is not as dense and is not as built out and feels a little bit more connected to nature. It feels a little bit more like, it's not as, full of people all the time. And I think there's already sort of a sense when you look at some of the other things that people talk about in the survey with regards to transportation safety is that, there's plenty of people that talk about the crossings, especially, US 6 and Racer Drive. But there's plenty of people that also have mentioned that they feel like the traffic congestion, especially in the winter, is just reaching the point where it's just untenable. And I think that there's sort of this sense that when you go to places like, a Breckenridge or a Vale, that, it's busy enough, with foot traffic and auto traffic. The auto traffic is bad enough in Keystone. We don't want to feel like we're, just congested in all areas of life. That's sort of my sense of the conversation. I don't know if maybe Peter, you've gotten the chance to kind of have other conversations, or if there's other things you would say that you've experienced.
That pretty much covers the big ones: traffic, density, um, the continuous buzz of activity, and which is kind of the inverse of we like nature. So I kind of like, I don't want to connect them 100% that way, but that's definitely something I've gotten. So yeah, but everything you just mentioned is absolutely something I've heard directly through my quick conversation with people when I say, what do you mean by that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Well, and so again, there's a lot of if those of you in the room that either took the survey or got the chance to look at the questions, you'll know that there's a handful of questions at the end where folks are asked to do mostly write in their responses. I did not include any breakdowns of those in this particular presentation because we got a lot, and so it would just be a little overwhelming to throw that many words at you all in a presentation format. But again, when I send the engagement summary to Lindsay, I'll make sure that you all get the chance to get your eyes on it too. It's here for you as well as a resource. I will warn you though that we're at page 105 and I'm still working on it. So yeah, don't take it in all at once. All right, well, let's go to the next slide. So one of the questions that we asked were what kind of services or businesses would people want to see more of, right? And I think one thing that was interesting in the conversation with EPS earlier, right, was that, that the job growth number being kind of small, but also, thinking about there are businesses in Keystone that may redevelop over time. There are places that could see new businesses over time. What are things that people feel like they may want to see more of? That's maybe not currently in existence or maybe is undersupplied in Keystone. So the options here were childcare, libraries, mail services, restaurants, retail, medical services. So think your doctors and dentists, offices and co-working space, bars and breweries, art galleries and creative industries, commercial office space. Again, we'll pull the others in the longer report. What was interesting to me is that the ones that got the most votes were mail services and restaurants. Mail services, I was not surprised by. I've heard a number of people indicate they wanted to see mail services. Restaurants was a little more surprising to me because if you'd asked me to form what I think was going to be really high based on my anecdotal conversations that I've had with folks thus far, I would have said grocery store. Just because I've heard a lot of people say that they would like to see more grocery options that aren't like the super small scale ones, like the example of, in River Run Village or the Keystone Gas and Grocery, without having to go to Dillon, or Frisco or Silverthorne to really get groceries. So it's interesting to me to see that this number of response is going into restaurants, but that's just what the participants responded.
Dylan.
But I'll pause here.
Hey, Dylan, I've got
Go ahead.
a comment on grocery stores.
Yeah,
They're really hard to make feasible in small communities. And, it's, they're gonna look at the market and be like, we've got however many stores in
Right.
Dillon and Silverthorne. There's no way we're putting one in Keystone. So it's, you can try to look at other models, like taking, like markets that, probably, expand or build on the smaller things that are here. The town of Winter Park did a project a few years ago, a Fireside Market Eatery that they had a philanthropic developer, and they put a lot of public money into it, and they had to subsidize it to get a more, it's a pretty decent grocery store. I don't know if you know where that is. It's, if you go over to Winter Park much, you probably don't if you live here, but in the town of Mountain Village, Telluride Mountain Village, they desperately wanted a market in their community as well. And they had a building and they subsidized the heck out of it. So it takes a lot to just kind of set expectations on that. So maybe it's good that it didn't come
I
out.
was gonna say, it's probably good.
Yeah.
It wasn't that high.
yeah,
I
no,
got-
that's a
I
good
got a
point.
fo-
Thanks for that, Brian. Yeah.
Maybe it was
Dylan,
too
I
much.
got-
I apologize.
Dylan, I got to follow up on that.
Oh,
Okay,
Okay,
please.
go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, so, good part of my career is in retail and entertainment. And the problem is, first of all, there's just a physical constraint on the way the spaces were laid out. And I'm not going to bore everybody with them, but very few of those spaces are conducive for a tenant to make money. Just lack of storage space, front to width, storefront, I can go on and on. So there's a lot of physical constraints that just can't, I don't know how you fix them as it relates to River Run. And the other one is just the traffic, how many of us have gone through, it's like we don't want traffic, but the restaurants and retail do. And the types of rents that a typical developer would want, it just, you're pulling, it's the opposite, pull against it. And so I bet you most of those restaurants now are either probably not even percentage rent. They may just be paying extras, CAM and taxes. And so now you got the developer or Vail underwriting it. So it just, it's just, you don't want traffic, but you need traffic. So I don't know how
The
we
catch 22.
yeah. So we all want this, but the person that's going to drive, whether it's a national or a local, they're just like, the numbers don't work. So that's the struggle here. That's the elephant in the room. So I just wanted to throw a little cold water here, but got
No,
to
that's
solve.
good context,
So,
Steve. Thank you.
okay.
Well,
One of the-
all right. Well,
Go ahead.
Quick comment on the restaurants. One of the concepts, or at least a lot of things I get from the ones who live here full time, literally year round, is not that we don't have enough restaurants, but none of them are open in May and September,
Exactly.
or 1/10 of them. And it actually is tricky to figure out who is open or
When.
not and when, exactly.
when.
Hours. I've
Yeah,
I've
one
gone to
day a
many
week
places
or-
and say, there's a little sign that says, oh, by the way, we decided not to be open now.
Yeah.
But your website says you were. Well.
And you can't
oops.
blame them. I mean,
Absolutely.
yeah. it's-
Sometimes it's
right.
just a matter of communications
Yeah.
might be a little more effective.
Lindsay, I'm sorry, I got a quick follow-up just in general. One comment, it's, again, unsophisticated survey, but when we go there, we'll sit a lot of times in Kickapoo out there. And it's funny, I don't know what the schedule is, but I've seen a lot of people come and get really ticked off that the gondola is not working. And I think there's a schedule to it, but it seems to be a little bit more haphazard. And I've heard from a lot of people that they like the gondola because they like going to the top of the mountain. And for whatever reason, when it's not running, people don't know it's not running. And a lot of people just get like upset about it and maybe they don't come back. So I don't know, maybe it's a small point, but the gondola, as I've seen it from people that visit us, it's an attraction that people like to be able to experience. And so do you have any background or information on that?
Only in the fact that the mayor and the town manager have had conversations on that very issue with reps from Keystone Resort.
Good.
Okay. Okay,
I
all
will
right,
say
just
that
want, just want to add that in. Okay, thanks.
for what it's worth, Steve, I've actually heard a lot of people mention that as well, just anecdotally.
Oh,
All
okay.
right, well, next slide, please. So, we were also asking about which transportation initiatives would be most important for the town to be pursuing. So the options were improve local transit with increased frequency and better routes. So this would be potentially different than, necessarily the Keystone Vail Resorts provided shuttles. Improving the bikeability of town with off-street path connectivity and improved wayfinding. Improving the pedestrian safety of US 6 crossings. Improving pedestrian ease of movement with better pathway connectivity. So basically helping people get to the already existing multi-use paths in a more efficient manner, and just letting them know that they're where they can access them, and focusing on the reduction and or management of traffic congestion, and then others. What's interesting to me is that what stood out highest here is the improved pedestrian safety of US 6 crossings and the bikeability and ease of pedestrian movement kind of stood out above reduction of traffic congestion and traffic management. Um, that's just not something you always see in these types of surveys, that for people to be that much more in favor of trying to invest in improved pedestrian and bike safety. So to me, that was kind of cool to see, but I also think that that might not be surprising to many of you, just simply because of the nature of what you were hearing when the town was going through its incorporation process. Knowing that, a big factor for many of you was trying to work more efficiently with CDOT on improved pedestrian safety. Well, I can linger here, but I can also, or I can keep going.
No, keep going.
Okay, next slide. And then, on that note, so understanding that 6 is a bit of a challenging place, what intersections would be the most prioritized? And I won't go through all of these just to kind of be a little respectful of time here, but the ones that jumped out clearly the highest were 6 and Racer Drive, which I'm sure is not a surprise, and 6 and West Keystone Road, so near the Keystone Grocery and Gas. And then sort of the folks that kind of fell into that, near third and fourth categories were 6 and East Keystone and US 6 and Montezuma Road. And then kind of going down from there was Tennis Club Road and St. John, and Antler's Gulch. So I can pause, but I'll ask first of all, just quickly, is there anybody that's really surprised by this or felt like maybe any one of these other options should have stood out a little bit higher?
No, so far, this is all seeming very expected,
Okay. In some ways, that's good.
which is good.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, next slide. And then, so this is talking a little bit about sustainability and resilience initiatives, and just wondering what people are interested in seeing the town start to pursue. So the big one was wildfire hazard mitigation. And, my understanding is just in some conversations with Lindsay is the town's already getting to work on some wildfire hazard mitigation in partnership with private property owners, which is fantastic. Then we also talked about the next one, the next biggest one was the Snake River water quality and ecological health. Now that was a tricky one. As many of you know that the Snake River water quality is not great just from the history of mining. But there's the partnerships that would need to happen in order to try and get the water quality up to a certain level. It'll take time. It'll take some intention. So that kind of goes back to something that Brian was mentioning too about the various policy choices that you all will have as a town, and how you want to be prioritizing the investments and the partnerships that you're going to be making over time. But it's, I think, important to know that improved access to the Snake River was something, and improved just the ability to kind of connect with the river showed up a little bit highly in the recreation offerings. And then again, the water quality element showed up highly here. So it just may be something to think about. Other things that came up as important were composting and sustainable waste management programs and water conservation. What's really interesting to me is as I was putting together the engagement report, a lot of the feedback that we got on the physical boards at the open houses, like it's pretty much the exact same things here, and at least in this particular category is like these are the things that received the most votes, and then kind of going down from there. So it is really interesting to see that the sort of digital survey responses are almost exactly mirroring the in-person responses we're getting. I'll pause there for a sec.
We're good.
All good.
Alrighty, next slide. And so this is, going back to housing for a minute. The question was, have housing challenges affected you or someone you know in any of the following ways? So the questions were needing to move to a smaller or lower quality housing unit due to cost. And nearly 60% of survey respondents said that either this has happened to them or somebody they know. Needing to move far from my job to afford a place to live. A little over 40% of respondents said that this was something that has happened to either them or someone they know. Not being able to buy a home or renting for longer than anticipated. Over 50%. Needing to live with roommates or family for budgetary reasons, again, over 50%. And then needing to move away from the area altogether, just under 40%. So, I think we don't have to linger on this one for long. We've talked about housing sort of ad nauseum this evening, but I think this is just a helpful thing just to kind of add a little bit of the lived experience perspective to the data that EPS is pulling. Next slide. Okay, right. So this is, we're kind of out of the chart world here for a minute, and I alluded to this earlier, but I'll just reiterate some of the open-ended responses or questions that we asked at the end of the survey were, how would you describe tourism in Keystone in relation to your experience of living in Keystone? If there's one thing you could change about the town of Keystone, what would it be? And if there's one thing you would never want to change, what would that be? And so stay tuned, because the longer engagement summary will include all the raw feedback that we received there, so you all get the opportunity to see what participants were saying. Next slide. And then this is just, I think this is my last slide. So I'll pause and see if there's anything about the survey first before we kind of go into next steps.
We're good.
Okay. Well, so what's
Wore 'em
next?
out.
Yeah, what's next for us is, so we're in the background also, in addition to putting together the engagement summary, we're beginning to start to write some chapters of the plan, which is exciting, that we're at this point in the process. And so our plan is by September 5th to send a couple of chapters, namely land use, parks, open space and trails, community profile, and sort of the background chapters over to Lindsay for his review. And then we'll plan to meet back up with you all again in your September meeting. I believe that's September 18th, if I'm not wrong, to just kind of start to discuss some of those initial chapters and some of the initial recommendations. So you'll have had a few days ahead of your scheduled meeting to get the chance to start to look at, what we're putting pen to paper to. And then, EPS's team has heard a lot of great feedback from you all this evening about the housing needs assessment draft. And, as Brian mentioned earlier, next week we're meeting with the Summit Combined Housing Authority. So we'll start to incorporate some of what we're hearing into the draft and start to work on the next version. We'll send the engagement summary, so that's supposed to go to Lindsay tomorrow afternoon. And then we'll be checking in again with the town council again on September 9th, and then checking in with planning and zoning. So you all again, September 18th, looks like I had my date correct. And then another town council check-in on those draft chapters on the 23rd. So kind of a lot to look forward to, but we're getting towards the fun part of the process where we're giving you a lot to react to, which is also exciting.
Thank you, Dylan. It's interesting that so many of the things that you connected to housing really dovetailed nicely with our discussion earlier this evening. So it's very complementary information. So that's reinforcing.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you all.
Did I
Yeah,
see
thanks.
something in the paper today about Keystone is getting some kind of separate funding to do a tourism study? It's really broad, but no, it was something, it was in the.
I didn't see.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm just saying, no, it was a blurb in the,
For the,
Thank you.
more research about the destination marketing organization and some like marketing efforts.
Oh,
So
okay.
there's a grant for like the initial research process of that.
Oh.
we are likely going to receive.
Great.
Awesome.
I asked and answered. Thank you.
There we go.
Sweet.
And thank you very much, Dylan. And actually, that question
course.
was tied right into our, is there any other business? Which was our last thing on our agenda. And if not, I think we're ready to end this meeting. We covered a lot. We really did cover a lot. If I could have a motion to adjourn the meeting,
So moved.
a second.
Second.
All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody who is opposed? Okay, with that, our meeting is officially adjourned. Thanks, everyone. Thanks,
Thank you
everyone.
so much.
Everybody.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good night. Bye.
I didn't want to bother the whole team about it.